Welcome back to What's the Truth podcast. We are happy to host one of our own, Pastor Chuck Chambers, the lead pastor here at Woolsey. Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So this is obviously a bit unique for me in that you are my dad, and I am excited to be able to do this podcast with you, but not everyone knows that. In fact, probably a lot of people listening don't know that. And they also don't know how long you've been a pastor here. Can you tell us when you first came to Woolsey Baptist Church?
Sure. I came in September of 1987, so that's quite a few years now, coming up on, it'll be 38 years this September.
And I was a year old, right?
You were just a little guy, yes. You
Quite
were
a bit has changed.
in a car seat.
Well, that's changed, obviously, for you and I, but it's also a lot has changed also with ministry. What, in your opinion, has changed about ministry when you compare the 1980s and 1990s to today?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, Stephen, is that everything has changed, and in some ways nothing has changed. So when I say everything has changed, culture is vastly different. Culture has changed. Values. There was, I guess, more of a Christian orientation. I remember when I first came, meeting with someone that was just encouraging me as a new pastor that half the people moving into a community come from a Baptist background, and so that's just changed so dramatically. And values, as I mentioned. What probably hasn't changed is that people are people. Sin has, goes back to the fall of man in the garden. And so the consequences of sin and the brokenness that it brings, that really has not changed. And the needs of people from the effects of what sin brings and does has not changed. So those are just a few things that come to mind.
Yeah. You've stayed a really long time compared to statistically what most pastors' tenure is. Why do you think the majority of pastors only stay a handful of years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that God calls men to do different things. And so I would say, first of all, for lack of a better word, I would give the benefit of the doubt. I think that clearly there are men that God calls to a church for a season, and they have an assignment from God. Maybe it's to help a church turn around. Maybe it's to help a church through a really hard season. Maybe it's to prepare the church for a different era, a different ministry. But then again, I think another component is that, this yourself, ministry's hard. There's a lot of challenges that come, and there's a lot of discouragement. I think most people see a senior pastor on Sunday. They hear him preach. They might see him do weddings or conduct a funeral or interact with people, and it looks on the surface, it looks like it's just the greatest thing in the world. And really it is, but there's pressures, there's stress, there's challenges. So burnout is a real issue. I think if you don't take care of yourself, those things can happen. So
what is burnout? I mean, I hear that word tossed around. In fact, if you Google pastoral tenure, that's one of the big words that pops up. What is burnout, and how have you apparently avoided it?
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a good textbook definition for burnout, and I don't know that I could give that off the top of my head. But to me, burnout is a phrase. I don't know when it was coined, but essentially it means you just reach the end of yourself. You don't really have the emotional capacity to keep going. It can be physical exhaustion. It can be emotional. You're just emotionally spent. I don't know that it's necessarily the same thing as depression or despondency, but it's just a sense in which you can't keep going, and you lose your drive, you lose your motivation, you have no desire. So that is a reason that some pastors leave. Quite frankly, again, I don't know if you want to follow up on that, but I would also say that in addition to the stresses and toils and strains of ministry, some churches are just really hard on pastors. Their expectations, they expect more than the average typical person can do. They have high demands, and quite frankly, they don't take care of their pastors. There's an expectation that the pastor, and sometimes the pastor's wife, be perfect, that they have perfect kids. And when any of those break down, there's conflict. So for various reasons, churches just have a history of being hard. So I know there's some good, faithful, godly men that have been in churches that it just wasn't going to work. So it just became necessary to move on.
Chuck, I think if I understand the statistics right, one reason why pastors are leaving the ministry is because an unusual amount of stress that they feel. And I suppose that stress can come from a lot of reasons, maybe high expectations, the sense or need to please people, or a feeling like the world might be on their shoulders. How do you deal with that type of stress in ministry?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's an how shall I say it? There's an understanding that there is a stress. There is going to be stress in ministry. I think people can deal with it in different ways, but I don't think anyone can completely avoid it. The idea that there are expectations and people that want you to do this or not do that, I would say, thinking of Moses, perhaps, when he was trying to do everything, and he was standing before the people hours on end, and his father-in-law said, "You're going to wear yourself out. This is unsustainable." So I think there's a sense in which you have to realize you're just a man. I remember asking a custodian when I was a youth pastor years ago. I remember asking Mr. Houston what advice would you give me? He was probably in his 80s then. And I remember him saying, "Remember, you're just a man." And I thought, is that all you got? That's the best you've got? I'm just a man. The older I've gotten, the more sense that makes. So you're not unlimited. You don't have unlimited strength, wisdom. You don't know all the answers. And the sooner you learn that, the better. So stress is inevitable, or demands of people's expectations. I think you have to know that there's some things you can't do, some things you just have to say, somebody else can do that better, and let them do it.
So most of our audience is not a pastor or working in ministry full time, but probably some are listening that are. How do they avoid this thing called burnout?
Yeah. So, I mean, this may sound like I'm spiritualizing it, but obviously there's a couple of things like praying a lot, not neglecting your devotional life. I think keeping your priorities straight, that you are, if a pastor's married, his wife is his first priority. If he has children, he has to take care of his family. He has to shepherd his family. I think we're emotional, we're physical, and we're spiritual beings. And so we have to take care of ourselves in all those areas. And you have to realize you have limitations, that, I've heard somebody say, the devil doesn't take a time off or a vacation, so I don't. I think quite honestly, it's a foolish thought for a pastor to say that I'll just adjust my schedule by what the devil supposedly does. you have to rest. You have to take care of yourself. You can't be lazy. You shouldn't be lazy, but neither should you think you can, consistently work a 55 or 60 hour a week every week of the year. So you have to know when to take your foot off the gas. You have to find outlets, find things that you enjoy. And you have to try to, good nutrition is important. You can't live off of Coca-Colas and pizza. And I think just taking care of yourself is a big part of that.
Well, by God's grace, you've been able to do that, been a part of a great church, and since God's call to remain here for 37 years, right?
Correct.
Is that what you said? What are some advantages that yields for you compared to a guy that maybe just showed up or is only in his 4th or 5th year at a church?
Yeah, I would say the advantage of long-tenured pastoring is you grow to love the people, and not everybody. Everybody's not going to love you. A lot of people are not, quite frankly, not even going to like you. They'll tolerate you, but you grow in your love for that family, that faith family, and you get to see, particularly when a ministry goes into decades, you get to be not necessarily present when a baby's born, but you get to go to the hospital and you get to, or go by a home and welcome a new baby into the family, and then you get to see that child grow up, and you see that little girl. I just was out in a hall, and a little girl, probably 2 or 3, she wanted to say hi to me and wanted to show off a shirt or a dress she was wearing. And so you get to see them at that stage, and then you see them go through school, graduate. Sometimes you get to do their weddings, and then you get to see them have children. And so that's just an incredibly neat thing to see families and how they progress. I think another component is, I think we overestimate what we can do in one day or one sermon or one series of sermons, and underestimate what happens over the long haul of investing in people. So discipleship, watching men grow, particularly seeing men that are spiritually infantile in some ways, and then seeing them grow and grow strong in grace and watch them become godly men and strong leaders. So that's definitely an advantage of a long-tenured ministry.
Well, as your son and fellow pastor here, I applaud you for your long tenure time, and it's commendable today.
Thank you.
It seems like whether it's ministry or, frankly, any vocation, people hop around from one job to the next nowadays. And again, like you said, there are probably good reasons in many cases for that, but I think there's a lot to be said about perseverance and steadfastness.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, a lot of our listeners are not pastors and don't necessarily think a lot about pastoral tenure, but they would love to get to know you better, and particularly some of the things that they don't necessarily have a chance to ask you or know about you. So what excites you about Monday mornings and coming to the office side of your job?
Yeah. So, pardon me. I think every Monday morning is a new start, right? It's the day following the Lord's Day when we've gathered to worship. So there's new opportunities. There are always challenges.
Perhaps we should actually start with this question. Some may not know you come here during the week.
Yeah.
Most probably assume you pop in or out, but what does the rhythm look like Monday through Friday for you?
So I get in Monday mornings, usually around 8:15. I do a little reviewing for a staff meeting that we do. So Monday mornings is basically taken up with meetings. There's a shift to making plans for visits later in the week. I take some time to lay out sermon material on Monday. I generally know what I'm preaching on, preaching through books of the Bible. So,
what about Tuesday, Wednesday,
yeah,
Thursday?
So Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays are it changes in some ways. I mean, there's changes that will come up that will create adjustments to the schedule, but try to map out the week. And Tuesdays, basically, I try to devote most of the day to sermon preparation. Try to be ready on Wednesday morning when we do a service preview. So most of the day Tuesday and half a day Wednesday is I try to lock down on sermon preparation. Sometimes there's meetings to prepare for. We have an elders meeting once a month on Tuesdays. Thursdays, there's visits that I try to make Thursday afternoons, sometimes finishing sermon preparation on Thursday.
How often are your plans interrupted with something unexpected?
Daily.
Okay.
Almost daily. I'm not good at saying no, and so people are in and out of my office. That's a weakness I have. I've tried for a while to have a sign on the door that says sermon preparation, and people generally have respected that. But I'm a pretty open door guy, and I realize I'm not the only person that has a schedule or trying to get things done. So there's
it's probably hard to be somewhere 37 years and not have people want to stop in and ask or say something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What do you not enjoy about being in Christian ministry, particularly being in pastoral ministry? And maybe it's a softer way to ask that question would be, what are the parts that are less enjoyable?
Okay, full transparency, I don't like when meetings drag on. That's not enjoyable to me. If they're productive, if we're getting something done, if we're moving the ball down the field, but
I'm not sure anybody likes meetings.
Well, I think some people do, but when they drag on and on, that's I don't enjoy that. I think it's challenging to me when I feel like I'll be honest. There's just days that when I finish preaching and I feel like I didn't make any connections. That some of that spiritual warfare. I'm sure that this sense that nobody's listening and it's the message is falling on deaf ears. But overall, there just aren't many things that I can point to and say I don't like that. Meetings that drag on, that comes to mind.
What do you enjoy more, preparing to preach or preaching?
Preparing. I love to study. I think sometimes I over-prepare because I get through with all my reading and writing and word studies that I can try to do and realize there's more than I can pack into a sermon. So I learn. I'm still growing, still learning. It's not that I certainly do enjoy preaching. I've never felt like that. I've heard guys say, I live to preach. I'm not happy if I'm not preaching. I do enjoy preaching, but I don't really feel like I come away emotionally charged because I'm up to preach. So it's not that I don't enjoy it. I do. But to that question, do I enjoy more preparing or preaching? I enjoy preparing. I enjoy one-on-one with other men. I enjoy conversations in small groups. So those are some things that stand out.
Well, you spend a lot of time here. It's not your life. I'm sure the listeners would enjoy hearing what else you like to do when you go home in the evening or on the weekends.
Yeah. So I'm very happily married. now. I still love, and I'm excited about going home and being with Lisa and spending time with her. We're in that stage of life where we're empty nesters. We love it when we're with our grandchildren and obviously our children and their family, spouses. But
speaking of grandchildren, I heard you help out with one of your grandchild's baseball team. Is that right?
Yeah, just actually right before this podcast, I was helping coach a little league team. So I enjoy sports. I enjoy going to grandkids' soccer games and watching. And this year I helped with a little league baseball team. So one does gymnastics. So it's a lot of fun.
What about reading? Do you read at home or at work?
I do enjoy reading. Reading is a part of my devotional time outside of Bible reading. I call it wake up or warm up reading. So I'm always working through a book and
fiction, nonfiction. What's your preference?
Both, but I'll usually start my morning off my devotional time with maybe 5 or 10 minutes of reading, and then sometimes I read in the evenings.
Tell us a little bit about your quiet time. Some listeners are familiar with that term, others may not be. What is a quiet time? What does it look like for you? What are the advantages to doing this thing you called a quiet time?
Mm-hmm. So a quiet time, devotional time, Bible reading is, for me, it's a time for personal worship. It's a time to set aside. I do it every morning. It's pretty much been embedded as a rhythm in my life since I was, I would say, 18 years old. And I was challenged to do this by a youth pastor when I was, again, I'm going back many years now, but to take time to open the Bible. And so for me, it's, I already mentioned some wake up reading that I do. I'm reading through books of the Bible. I've read through the Bible numerous times. Right this year, I'm doing just the New Testament to slow down a bit. So I read a chapter, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes a half a chapter. I journal, which for me is it's just really simple. I put the date, I put the verses that I've read, and I just jot down some personal reflections or thoughts on what I've just read. I try to put down an application or two, and I pray. So there's nothing generally that's startling about it.
You do this at home or?
I do it at home. Yeah. I feel like for me, when I come here, I'm coming to my place of employment. So I try to do as the average man in our church would have to do. He can't go to church, he can't go to his place of employment and take the first 30 minutes and have a devotional time. So I get up early to do this, and I've done this when my children were small. I've just done it all through my adult life. And I've, sometimes it's felt legalistic. It's felt like an obligation, but I'm scared not to do it. I'm scared of the consequences I've heard too many stories of men who have made shipwreck of their lives in ministry. And to the man, you'll hear them say, I neglected my devotional time. And for me as a pastor, I don't want to live off of just preparing to feed others. I've got to feed myself. And yes, to some degree in sermon preparation, you are feeding yourself. I've already talked about that. But again, every man, every woman's got to decide what this looks like for them. But I need that time in God's Word. I need to read it. I need to hear it. And I need to pray. And so I have a prayer list on my phone. I have some written prayer requests. I've been praying this week. I asked last Sunday for just something I threw into the sermon. I didn't throw it in, it was planned, but if there's a need, if there's just something heavy on your heart, and I had about 8 people that left a very specific prayer request, and I've been praying this week every morning for these requests. So, yeah.
What if you have never done this before? How could that person get started? And what if someone has tried and been moderately successful or consistent, but after a week or 2 or a month gets out of the habit?
Yeah.
What do you say to those 2 people?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, don't beat yourself up.
Start with the person who's never done it before.
Okay. So I would start small. I wouldn't, I don't think I would say if you normally get up at 7 o'clock, I wouldn't say I'm going to get up at 5:30 and I'm going to read the Bible for an hour and pray for an hour. I would pick a reasonable time. If it's a student and she or he has got to be at school at 8 o'clock and they know what time they have to leave their house, I would try to just plan an extra 5 minutes and start with one of the Gospels. I would say the Gospel of Mark. Don't even try to read an entire chapter. Just most versions of the Bible there's paragraphs, divided into paragraphs. So 5 or 6 verses or 2 or 3 paragraphs. I wouldn't try to overdo it. I mean, if you can read longer, do, but a brief reading, and try to pick out 1 or 2 things that you see that seems like something you should apply to your life, or maybe something you should pray about. Maybe you see a particular area of your life that you need to adjust or correct. So that's something you could pray about. You could make a simple prayer list, 2 or 3 things you want to pray for. But if I've never done it, I would just think in terms of I'm going to dedicate or try to commit 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and rejoice in that. And if you miss a day, if you oversleep, if you have to be at work and you're late for work, I would say it happens. Don't feel like God's mad at you or God's angry.
What about the person who's tried and it just cannot seem to become a pattern in their life?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think they need to try to identify. This is my thought. Maybe identify why is this not a pattern? Maybe they're trying to emulate someone else. They've heard someone say, I have my devotions at 6 a.m, and they're just frankly not a morning person. They just don't function well at 6 a.m, and they've consistently tried to do something. Then perhaps maybe they're hitting all 8 cylinders at 10 o'clock at night. So I think perhaps trying a different time of day. Some might consider a different version. I grew up reading the King James Version. It's a beautiful translation. But for some, that version they may find the language difficult to read. They may be trying to pronounce words or using language that was more common a couple of centuries ago. So perhaps trying a different version, more readable version like the New International or the English Standard Version. I think having an accountability partner could also be an avenue that they could consider. For instance, if I'm a teenage boy and I'm struggling, I might ask another teenager, hey, will you hold me accountable? Will you ask me how I'm doing in my devotions? A man could ask another man. A brother could ask a brother, or a woman could ask another woman. Could just be honest and say, I'm struggling with this. I really need some help. Will you pray for me, and will you hold me accountable? And let that be a source of motivation. So those are just off the top of my head a couple of ideas. I just think I should say, if I could stress this, I do think devotions are important, and I think it's a way that we need to personally worship and honor.
Devotions being the same as quiet time.
Devotions, quiet time, Bible reading,
Okay.
yes, all the same. I think we need this. Please don't hear me say I'm marginalizing or saying some need it, some don't. But I don't think we should put ourselves on a guilt trip, or someone, if they've tried and failed. That's the very thing Satan wants you to do. Satan wants to say, oh, you've tried this, it doesn't work for you, you might as well give up. And I think there's a lot of things that if you plug away at it, that you will discover that consistency in time may come.
Good. Who has impacted you the most over the past 30 or 40 years of your ministry?
Are you talking about other men in ministry or anyone?
Anyone.
Yeah. So I'll just say my wife, Lisa, has and continues to make a huge impact on my life. She is a godly woman. I was attracted to her as a young woman, even as a teenager, because I knew she loved Christ and she loved her church. And
A lot of people would be curious. How did you meet?
yeah, so we went to the same high school, and I was a year ahead of her. It was a big high school. I knew her some. She says now she knew me. I was an athlete. Maybe that had something to do with that. But so basically, I'd graduated, and this is really going back to letter writing days. But I was away in college. I wrote her a letter. I was coming home, and
Did y'all go to church
did we go to church?
when you met? I mean, a lot of people maybe meet in a youth group. Did you?
We went to two separate churches, so we
Okay.
were not in the same church. So I wrote her a letter. It said I was coming home on a particular weekend, and asked her, would she, ask her for a date. And she said yes. And that started letter writing and more communication. And so that was the beginning.
Chick-fil-A your first date?
There was no, Chick-fil-A may have started, but there weren't many of them. So that wasn't a first date, no.
Where'd you go?
Honestly don't remember. She may, but I don't remember where we went.
Oh, that's not as important. Who else has impacted you?
Yeah.
One or
So-
two other people.
Yeah. So just to finish that about Lisa, she, her consistent walk with the Lord has impacted me. I know she prays for me. I can emotionally get discouraged, and so she's picked me up countless times and encouraged me. My pastor growing up, Cliff Duvall, had a huge impact on my life. He encouraged me that even before I knew God was doing this, I think, looking back, I think he knew what I didn't know. I think he sensed God's call. And so just little things he did, taking me a few times to make visits with him, or watching his life from a distance, watching how he led his family. So Cliff Duvall, another man who is now with the Lord, Dan DeHaan. Dan DeHaan led, I believe it was called the Metro Bible Study. And it was basically young adults, high school seniors, junior seniors, kids that could drive, college students from all over the, metro area. That it was a small Bible study that, as I recall, started in a man's basement, and it just grew and grew. When we were going, it was meeting in a middle school. He was a great Bible teacher. So Dan DeHaan certainly impacted my life. From a distance, Billy Graham, just his passion for proclaiming the gospel, preaching Christ. And then lastly, an evangelist by the name of Jesse Henley that came to our home church and preached a series of meetings, and God just, he just turned my world really upside down in that revival meeting with his preaching and how he led. And so those are some men that come to mind.
You mentioned a man that sensed God's call in your life decades ago. Do you think God is still calling people into ministry?
I absolutely do.
What does somebody do if he thinks God may be calling him, or a young lady senses a call into some type of ministry?
Yeah, so I think this is where churches, and whether they're called Sunday school teachers or youth leaders or staff pastors, we need to be keen to that, keyed in on that. We need to have our ears and eyes open and encourage it. But I think the question was, if a young person has a sense, I guess I should back up and say, I believe every believer is called to faithfulness. Every Christian is called to be a faithful disciple maker, to grow. And some will do that in medicine or law or in construction or all kinds of career fields. They'll be faithful Christians. But within that group, God is going to call some young men to be pastors, to be preachers. He's going to call some young women to vocational Christian ministries, whether that's teaching other women or counseling or ministry to children or to the mission field. And so for most people, I think that call is it's a gradual sense of God's leadership. But if there's a young person listening that thinks, maybe God's calling me, I don't know for sure, I would encourage them to talk to a leader in their church and just express it and begin to pray about it and to begin to say, God, my yes is on the table. If you're calling me to vocational ministry, give me more direction, give me guidance on this. But talking to a mature, godly Christian, and that doesn't have to be the pastor or a pastor in the church, but expressing it. Hey, I really sense maybe the Lord's calling me to ministry, I think is a good first step. Continuing to pray, continuing to be open, looking for opportunities, and testing the waters. Maybe there's a sense God's calling you to ministry, and by testing the waters, you're given an opportunity to teach a class. You're given an opportunity to give a testimony. And, you don't necessarily measure, was I successful or unsuccessful, but what does that do in your heart? Does it stir your heart? Is it like, good night, I wish I could do this all the time? Or if it's, wow, I'm glad that's over, I hope they don't ask me to do that again. Maybe that's a sign that the Lord's not calling you. But I don't think you can say better than something, I believe it was Spurgeon that said, if God's calling you, you're not going to be happy doing anything else until you say yes.
That's good. How can people listening pray for you and for Woolsey Baptist Church?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question, and I would say, if I could first of all quickly say, I'm sure there's some listening that I'm not their pastor or they have churches that they're attending. I hope that's the case, and I hope they will pray for their pastor. I hope they will realize that pastor needs their prayer probably far more than they realize he needs it. And so I would just encourage every listener, pray for your pastors, lead pastor, staff pastors, lift them up in prayer. For me personally, I want to be faithful to the Lord. I want to set a good example. I'm more cognizant, I think, than ever that there's just been so many ministerial train wrecks, Stephen. There's been so many men that are respected and that have made shipwreck of their ministry. And I want to finish well. I want to run well to the end. Paul told the Galatians, you did run well. What hindered you? I want to finish well. I want to serve the Lord Jesus well. So I would say to be faithful in every way. I want to be a better evangelist. I want to be more consistent and more faithful in sharing the gospel. And so I'm particularly praying right now that in the month of May, I'll have an opportunity to share the gospel and see someone pray to receive Jesus and then disciple that individual in the coming months. I would say one last one is pray for my preaching, that I'll be clear, that I will, as you get older, I don't want to ramble. I don't want to just, I want to be true to the Scripture, and I want to be relevant, but I don't want to be so relevant that I'm disregarding faithfully preaching the Scripture. So faithfulness in preaching and accurately handling the text. I want to do that well.
Good. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was an honor to host you and to hear your heart for ministry and your dedication to the church. It was an honor to learn a bit more about your journey and who you are as a person. If you have questions about our church or you want to hear more from Chuck, you are welcome to visit www.woolseybaptist.org or stop by and say hello to Pastor Chuck on a Sunday morning or Wednesday night when we're gathering. We also would invite you to like or subscribe to the podcast, What's the Truth, on whichever platform you use. And we cannot wait to share more episodes with you in the coming weeks.